Hey everybody, and welcome to another edition of Speaking of. My guest today is Seth Maislin, who is what I'd like to think of, besides being a good friend and business associate, he's a guru in classification and taxonomy and indexing and content modeling and all those things that we wrestle with as information professionals to greater and lesser degrees of success. So say hi, Seth. Hi,
Hi
Seth.
there.
Hi, I'm Steve. I'm a taxonomist. Um, we had a really interesting conversation it's been going on for a long while, actually. That really boils down to almost the inverse of what we've been doing as information professionals for 20 years, where we try to represent digitally the truths of the physical world. I'm not going to do this justice, so I'll let you explain more clearly in a second. But basically, what Seth has postulated is, well, the way I interpret it is we want to look at it the other way, too. That we don't want to sever that connection, and there may be lessons to be drawn in the other direction, things that we maybe can't represent digitally, that as we go, and depending on the application, may actually require a different sort of thinking. I like the phrase that you use. I'm planting all the seeds now, so then we can wind you up and let you go. The isness of these things. What is this? And how do we best capture that? And the example that you brought up that really did capture my attention is the paperclip.
Mm.
Paperclips are fun. Wait till you hear this, folks. Go ahead. Tell us what I'm talking about.
I would love to. Thanks for letting me jump in there. So the experience that I had is I was on a project where there was an organization that had been very paper-based for a long time, and they had to move offices. And it meant basically they had to give up a whole lot of file cabinet space, and it inspired them, forced them to think about digitizing all of their documents, right? Scanning them, making digital copies. And it had been a long time since I had to actually think about paper, physical paper. I got my start in this business, among other things, writing the indexes that went in the backs of books. And back when you did that, the whole book had to be written and paginated so that you could put in the back, artificial intelligence, comma, page 135 to 139. You had to have paper.
Right.
But it had been 15, 20 years, and the world had moved on. And now all of a sudden I was looking at paper again, and it got me thinking of, what did we lose when we digitized? We used to struggle to define the digital world. And now here I was faced with cabinet after cabinet of paper that you'd think should be very familiar to me. I'd known paper for a long time. That's where all of our models were built. We're talking about actual paper in cabinets and folders with Post-it notes on them. But when we started thinking about digitizing them, I found myself surprised by paper. There were things about it that I'm like, wait a minute. So for example, did you know that physical paper doesn't have a name? Did you know that? If I were to pick up a piece of paper right now, that piece of paper does not have a name. How does it not have a name? Everything has a name. It's no, only in the digital world do you have to give it a file name. Whether it was the old fashioned and had to be 8 characters followed by 3 characters, or today you can write really long names, or even our URLs have all of the symbols in them and contain a whole lot of information, right? But back then, paper didn't have a name. You couldn't tell 2 pieces of paper apart.
Newborns.
Newborns.
They come without a name.
They start without a name, but that changes very quickly.
Yes, it does.
And you can change the name of a newborn. That is true. So that is something newborns have over paper. Thank you for that. That's good. Newborn paper. I don't know which one has a name. So I thought, wow, document names. They didn't used to exist. That was a necessity in the digital world. Back in the paper world, if you made lots and lots of copies, you didn't identify them as copies. They were just copies. You couldn't tell them apart. You might have one, somebody else might have one. That was it. Today, you have to put a number on it or look at the date. So all the metadata that's used, that's been added, I found myself thinking, well, is that new information? Is that useful in a way that it's a shame we never had that with paper? Wouldn't it have been nice if we could have named all of our paper documents back in the day? It would have been work, but maybe there's value in that. And then like the paper clip. So this is where the conversation went. So in the case of the cabinet, I would go into the cabinet and I would pull out what were essentially, say, 5 sheets of paper. So I'm actually talking physical pieces of paper. Not all of them were 8.5 by 11. Some of them were different colors. Some of them were different signs. Think of a cash register receipt. And some of them were stapled, but all 5 of them were paper clipped. And I found myself looking at this saying, how many documents is this? See, I know how many pieces of paper it is. It's 3 8.5 by 11s, 1 half sheet yellow, and 1, skinny paper receipt that might come from a cash register. And things are stapled together. But how many documents is it? And if you were to scan it, you could scan the entire thing as 5 sheets of paper. It's one document. Or do you scan each piece of paper as though it's a different document? Where does the document begin and end? Right? And so when you put a paper clip on something, what does that mean? Like, does that mean that they're related? And if so, how? Is what's paper clipped in front newer or more important or superseding what's behind it? Or do you normally put it in the back and put the most important thing up front? And that's how you paper clip. And just this natural way where I just shove a bunch of pieces of paper together and I drive a staple through it or put a paper clip on it, I found myself saying, what is the digital equivalent of that paperclip? It is so hard in the digital world to paperclip things together. Either it happens automatically, they all share the same metadata. Oh, they're all related to the same client or the same city, and that way if I find one thing, I automatically find the other. It's as if they were paperclipped. Or am I actually saying, no, literally this receipt and this invoice and this payment, those 3 things all go together. They are part of the same transaction, the same business event. In which case, the paperclip is the business event, right? It's not the transaction or the receipt or the invoice. It's this larger business concept. And so I have to go create a paperclip in the digital world and tag everything to the paperclip. It's as if the paperclip is the most important thing and all the rest of it are just documents. So it got me thinking just how easy it is to work with paper without having to care about any of this metadata stuff. And yet my entire life is built around metadata. So what am I missing? So I've been fascinated by how we kind of lost track in a lot of ways of all of the things with paper.
That really is fascinating. To me, it speaks to the process component of all this stuff. My whole shtick has long been, what business problem you're trying to solve, and it's a very intentionally, it's a very process-oriented way of thinking. It's the way a lot of people think. It's really the only way I could get my arms around what happens in a business without getting lost in the detail of, well, is that content or data? I mean, fundamentally, it doesn't really matter. Like different size pieces of paper, like you just described. It's like, well, what's important is what's happening. Why is it happening? So you talk about the paperclip. What really resonates with me is that notion is like, well, it's the paperclip that's the important thing.
Yeah.
Which, when you say it out loud twice, just sounds absurd. And yet, that's sort of the linchpin of what we do, though, isn't it? It's trying to figure out how to maintain or represent those relationships electronically. Relationships between and among physical items. Over the years, I've tossed out the phrase context management, mostly just to roil the waters. But in a lot of ways, isn't that kind of what you're getting at? The role of the paperclip is to provide some context. How are these things related?
Yes. I think in the physical world, we have a lot of things that we still do, we take for granted, that help us manage our process, right? Where I hang my keys when I come into the house so that I know where they are. I either chose that point at random and then stuck with it, or I consciously decided I need a hook here and I put in a hook and this hook is now for my keys. I didn't label it. I didn't write on Sharpie 4 keys on it. But I did create a spot, and it is dedicated for my keys, and not only keys, by the way, but also scissors and other things I need to remember. Like, it sort of just became a hook and my keys are there.
Now, you can run with keys. You just can't run with scissors.
That's true.
Yeah.
So I think, in the digital world, you can't just put up a hook and say whatever, which, by the way, you can actually. They call that a folder. You just open a folder, don't give it a name, and put whatever you want in there, right? So we do that, but you had to create that folder just like I had to create a hook. Only you're supposed to name the folder, and you have to put the folder somewhere. Like, some of that thought process in the digital world is still not quite intuitive, even after how long have we been using folders now? Like almost 40 years, right? So in some ways, a lot of this physical world, I'm going to bend the corner to remind myself where I am. I'm going to stamp it to tell me that it's been approved. I'm going to staple it to tell me it's related to this document. And all of those things, we have these sort of physical mechanisms for, right? We organize things in a physical space based on our habits and our behavior. A lot of information architects will describe their sort of analogies, right? One of those great analogies is like you go to the hotel and they have an oatmeal bar, right? Where the oatmeal and the milk and the craisins and the brown sugar and the bowls and the spoons are all in one place. In nobody's house that I've ever been in is there an oatmeal bar. Spoons go with the forks and oatmeal goes in the cabinet with the cereal, right? But in the hotel, they actually create an oatmeal bar. And so they consciously were able to organize that physical space. In the digital world, we are often challenged to build the business equivalents of our oatmeal bar. I need to create an invoice management center. I need to create an inventory tool. I need a CRM to organize my communications with customers and partners. And we have to build oatmeal bars all the time among all of the various pieces that are out there. But it's a little different in the physical space because it's pretty obvious whether it works or not.
Well, but that's the thing. I mean, what you say is exactly true. But the oatmeal bar, it's created for the same reason that we do things electronically.
Yes.
It's all about throughput and efficiency. Because for the hotel, it's all about moving people through without log jams, and then people get annoyed because they have to wait, da-da-da. So it really is a process, a workflow, a meal flow issue.
Yes. Calorie management. So the thing I want to say, which to me sort of brings this together, right, is you have this layering in the physical world. The reason the oatmeal bar analogy is an information architect's dream is because it represents this concept very well. There are not a whole lot of physical space oatmeal bars. A lot of it is annoying. Even just a basic phone system. I have to pick up this person, they have to transfer me to somebody else in another office who like that doesn't make sense to me. Why can't it be as easy as an oatmeal bar? And the truth is even in physical space, we have a hard time with that. We have to work really hard in physical space to create an area of the kitchen where I can work, an area on my desk where I can work, a bedroom that I am comfortable going to sleep in, right? A car that I can get in and out of. And so it takes effort to do that in the physical space, just as this does. But the cues that we get in the physical world tend to be obvious. And the only cues that exist in the digital world are the ones that we consciously create, or those that are defaulted in the system and that get created for us. So if I wanted to create an inventory of something online, I have to really think hard. What are these things? What am I inventorying? Why am I inventorying it? How do I tell the difference between one object and another? Whereas if it were physical, well, I use the books example. I can walk into a library or look at my own bookshelf. I can just take my finger and kind of scan along the shelf and I go, that one. Because I know how my shelves are organized. I have a sense of what the book might look like or what it at least doesn't look like, and I can find it. In the digital world, you can't really do that unless you know one very specific thing, and that very specific thing is presented to you in a list. You don't get all the cues at once. You can only get one cue at a time. So if I remember the title, I can go alphabetically through a list of titles. But I have this book, and I remember it's got this kind of old-fashioned cover. It's kind of big. My kids are interested, so it's in a lower shelf. Like I have all of these cues that I can just do at once, and then I go, here it is, and I grab the book off the shelf, and I know what it is. And to me, that's the paperclip. The paperclip is so easy. And yet, as you're saying, as absurd as it is, it's probably more important than the documents themselves because the paperclip represents the business. It represents the context and the process and the value that those papers bring. At some point, I might need to use the paper, but ultimately, I'm just putting it in a cabinet. What really matters is that paperclip is there so that I understand the larger picture around those documents. Something that, by the way, does not exist in the paper world. It exists in the paperclip world, the file cabinets, in the staples, in the shelving.
So, very quickly, as I have one eye on the clock, and we can always continue this. And for the folks watching, we'd like to continue it with you too, please. So in the notes, I'll put how to get in touch with us. But what's the takeaway for information professionals who are watching this. What, you know,
Yeah.
I'm the so what guy. I love the discussions. I love the fixation on the paperclip. You know, it's such a quirky yet important perspective. It just really sends my spidey senses a tingling. But then I also want to say, well, so what, though? I mean, what is the practical takeaway of that perspective?
So I'm going to give you kind of the easy answer and the better answer. The easy
Okay.
answer is what we've been talking about. It's that there's a lot of process that we take for granted, and we have to remember that it's there, and we have to make the time and the energy to be user focused and process focused in how we design metadata and schemas and user interfaces and search experiences and so forth. But that's the no-brainer, right? We already brought that to the table when we sat down to talk about paperclips. So the next way, I think that the more challenging approach to this, I think, is you have to think about those places in business where the actual physical item, literally the thing you can pick up and hold, the paperclip, not paperclips in general, not here's a picture of a sample paperclip, like literally the paperclip in my right hand and not in my left hand, right? What's the difference? When you start touching the physical world with the digital, this discrepancy clashes, and it clashes hard. And so real life examples of this are in healthcare. Talk about the human being. I can talk about cancer research. I can talk about hospital care. I can do data-driven analysis that shows that this drug across most patients in this age group works. But I'm not talking about a literal human being. Once I talk about that literal human being, all bets are off the table. My model for cancer research is like, well, I don't know. This person could be an exception and they have a different history. So I can use the model maybe to approach it. But in the end, there's a point where do I throw it all away and start over? I'm talking to an actual human being with feelings and a very specific history. And we see this today with privacy. We want to do all the data stuff, but we don't care if their information's in there. And that's just the paperclip. The human beings, they're just the paperclip. The social security number and the name, that's the paperclip that ties together the drugs they take and the medicines they do and the surgeries they've had and their genetics. That's it. We're just paperclips. Or inventory management. I think you go to a supermarket and you say, okay, I want an apple. Well, in my head, I can think apples. I can think Gala apples. I know where they are at the Trader Joe's down the street. But when I get there, I actually pick up every single apple to make sure that it didn't get horribly bruised or rotten or is the right size. So I have an apple in the right hand and an apple in the left hand. There's a difference. Suddenly it matters. And we see this with online shopping. We get people to do our online shopping for us, and they fill our order, and then we've seen in the industry a real challenge with, well, how do they pick the fruit or the cuts of the meat? Like, do they really know what I meant when I said apple? Because I wasn't talking just any general thing that's spherical. Like, I wanted an apple of at least this size, of at least this color gradient. So, I mean, real estate, right? You're dealing with houses, actual houses you have to live in, right? Are they haunted? Like, we need to know. These are the things that matter. I'm not just moving into a paperclip. The actual house, not how many bedrooms, right? So we think about it. It's inventory management, it's shipping tracking, it's my package to my doorstep, all that physical world stuff, right? Healthcare, real estate, drug safety, finance, my accounts, my money, how I want to invest. That is physical. That is the physical world. At some point, you have to step off the ledge of the digital, and it lands on your doorstep in a box, right? That you have to bring in from the cold and open up and hope somehow it's real. Like, that's just what I did in the digital world actually looks right in the physical world. And I think it's really important to make sure that we're thinking about that physical world in the same way that, you know, the paperclip really has value. Well, that's all of that really is in the physical space, right? The digital world is just, you know, the wrapper.
Yeah, no, I think it's very true. Just one final comment from me, besides thank you for sharing this perspective
Pleasure.
with the world, and not just me. We've talked about this a few times over the past months. I think it is a critical perspective, not to get too divorced from the physical world, from the individual. I think it plays also into my sort of gut feeling that all the hype around artificial intelligence is misplaced. You know, lately I've gotten myself into some trouble, some notoriety anyway, by proclaiming in various forms, I don't think there's a single application yet that is truly artificial intelligence, and I'm talking about not cutting edge, innovative laboratory. I mean, the things that we do every day, that I think it's really all just various flavors and sophistications of machine learning, which is not a knock. That's very, very important and very, very useful. But I think when people think about artificial intelligence, they're assuming that all that context that you've just described is part of it. And it can't be. It's to a very large degree, it's just taking enormous data sets and applying them.
Mm.
And because those are enormous data sets, by definition, they're not all about you, Seth, or you, the viewer. So it's interesting.
No, that's a great point, right? It's making that transition, right? That you can look at lots and lots of cars and think that you understand cars, and now you actually have to recognize an honest to goodness car on the road in real life. And artificial intelligence is dealing with that digital to physical challenge. Certain artificial intelligence that's purely in the digital space, like digital marketing, to some extent doesn't cross that line nearly as much as some of the facial recognition, which is obviously an extreme case of isolating an individual physical instance of something. But I think you're right. I think all the holy grails of artificial intelligence have to cross this border from the digital world, where supposedly we have mountains of amazing data, and get it back down to, is this the Apple I want to buy or this one? And somehow that is the hard question AI is trying to get at. And I wish it luck.
Yes.
I tend to agree with you. It's not an easy path.
No. Well, we've gone way past the time limit that I always set for these things, but I not a surprise, I know, for those of you who watch some of these. But I think it's first of all, it's a great conversation. It is a very important perspective to keep in mind when you're doing your work. And I, for one, am grateful and comfortable that we ran over, because I think it's that important. So once again, Seth, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Folks, tune in to the next episode. And by all means, look at the past ones where we've covered some really fascinating subjects with some very fascinating people. And do keep those cards and letters coming. I always love talking with Seth and people like him. But we're posting these the way we are because they're for you. They're not for us, except it's nice over coffee or beer. All right, I think we won't go any further down that path. So thanks for viewing. Seth, once again, thank you. We'll see you all next time.
Thank you.